Well, before we get the pictures on, Clarinda? Yeah. I just want to thank all of you for coming today, and that you've lasted this long. You know, it was 9 o'clock when we started. That was 7 hours ago. I particularly also want to thank Mr. Pang. Oh, he's gone away. Mr. Nan Zhiguo, he has also disappeared. There he is. And the speakers or whoever are left to grace the occasion today and to speak on aspects of my grandfather. And it was really very revealing to find out that he's affected so many people, so many interesting and well-known people in their own rights. And these have enlarged his legacy, you see, and absolutely good for all times. Now, so long as you don't fall asleep, I want to make sure you don't fall asleep. I've got pictures to show you. Not many, but at least for the next few minutes, my talk isn't going to be very long. Tan Kah Kee. In this photo, which I will blow it up afterwards, had 4 wives and 17 children, 4 known wives. The first was in China, and I don't think she left China. She produced 4 sons and 2 daughters. The second wife was my grandmother, wife number 2. She's a local born, and she produced, so she told me, 16 children. Only 6 survived to adulthood. My father was the eldest son of that 6. She had 3 daughters, 3 sons. Number 3 wife had 1 son and several daughters. I can't remember how many. And the 4th wife, whom none of us have seen, she might as well not exist. Well, she produced a son, and we knew that son very well, and therefore we knew that she at one time existed, but probably lived in China and probably never left China to come to Singapore. I guess it is quite common for wealthy, well-known people in those days to have several wives and to have a lot of children. This is the very first picture, 1935, taken of Tan Kah Kee. As you can see, that was a time when he's already lost all his fortune. So he looked maybe quite relaxed, a bit rumpled. He was only with his 3rd wife. My grandmother was missing, I don't know why. But all the people surrounding him, the younger ones, were his children from 3 wives, as well as their spouses. I think one of them was Alice, Ai Li, Li Kongchen's wife as well. From the left, were children from the first wife. The short man on the left was uncle number 2, and then next to him was uncle number 1, Dan Jie Bin. And behind was uncle number 5, Kok Keng, from the 3rd wife, and so forth. My father was the very young, handsome man on the extreme right with a white jacket and the black shirt. I reckon he wasn't married yet. I think he was in his early 20s then. The children are probably from some of his children, so they are grandchildren. Let me go on to the next. Right, this is taken in 1949, just before he left for China. That is, I think the British had sort of edged him out. Here he was with his 2 wives, number 2 and number 3. Number 2 is my grandmother on his right side, and to the right of my grandmother was my brother, because he was the favorite grandson. He actually had very few grandsons from his son, so my brother was one of them, My brother then was like 8 years old. My two parents were not in the picture because I had just been born. They decided not to appear. The man on the left, right at the top row happened to be Lee Seng Wee, first son of Lee Kong Jian. And this is an interesting photo because not often, in fact, maybe this is the only time when he had a photo taken with the family and with the two wives. Now, before I go on, I like to say that Tan Kah Kee was a very stern and reserved father. His children actually feared him. And like most Confucian fathers, he was a strict disciplinarian. He never cracked jokes. He never bounced babies on his lap, I think. And he never relaxed with them. So he would expect all the caring and all the loving to be given by his wives, I had imagined. And he would only step in when he felt that his sons, and always sons, not daughters, when his sons were old enough to be taught the ways of the business world, right? And so therefore, when my father was in his early teens, he was kind of persuaded to go to his rubber factory and spend the whole day in the lab. My father was a chemistry student, actually, so that suited him in a way. But he kind of grudged all those days, especially during school holidays and weekends when his friends were all able to gallivant around town or go to the beach. Every day, he would be at the laboratory under the tutelage of his older brother-in-law, Mr. Un Kai Hong. Kai Hong's grandchildren are here today, glad to see, and his daughter too. Un Kai Hong was an MIT graduate, wasn't he? And very famous in his own rights. And he came from a very well-known Un family in Penang as well. So Kai Hong had the job of actually furthering the technology in grandfather's business. In the early, I would say from 1915 to the 1920s, late 20s, grandfather was at the peak of his wealth, and he lived in a grand mansion in Cavenagh Road. Now, part of his habits was to take daily strolls, daily walks alone in the Istana. When people asked him how did he gain access, he said, I just made friends with the guards. So every morning he would walk there alone. So he had a lot of time to ruminate, to think about things. Whenever he came home, he would eat all 3 meals alone, morning, noon, and night. He wouldn't get his family to eat with him. He would have his meals first. He would be served by his wife, my grandmother, that is. The other grandmother lived in another house. I'm not sure where, down the road maybe. Then after he finished his meal, his sons would eat, again supervised by the mother, and then the daughters, so 3 rounds. Daughters are particularly considered second-class citizens in those days. Now, it's a very funny story there. My grandmother, for the first 10 years of her marriage, produced nothing but daughters. Daughter after daughter after daughter. And my grandfather got so fed up. That was why he took a 3rd wife. She immediately produced a son, and that was Goh Pei, number 5th uncle. My grandmother was devastated. She went to see a fortune teller. And the fortune teller said, "Don't worry. This little girl that you brought with you, don't give her away. Instead, change her name to Po Ti, precious brother. She will bring brothers. And one day, when you're ready to go up the mountain, euphemism for coffin going up the mountain. You will have 3 sons to accompany you up the mountain. All that came true. My father was born a year later, then my number 7 uncle, 3 years later, and another 3 years later, Guan Ik, the youngest from that family. As for the 3rd wife, she produced nothing but daughters after that. So it's a very interesting story. It's true. So that's a bit of family folklore there. Now, Tan Kaki, as you could imagine, would have a lot of free time to himself. After coming home from work, in the morning he would be chauffeured to his office. In the afternoon, come back for lunch, quick lunch. Then he would go to his plantations and then come back for dinner. And he would never entertain friends at home. I don't know whether he would do that in Yishun later on. Oh yeah. Around the 1937-38, when he was raising funds for the Shandong relief, he would live in Yishun instead of living at home. And we reckon it was because he couldn't tolerate his fighting wives. They were quarreling amongst themselves. They were sort of vying for his attention. Yeah. And we young children will always have a lot of jokes about these 2 old women. It was quite hilarious. But during my father's days, there were no jokes because the enmity actually came down to the children. They would jeer at each other whenever they passed by in their cars. Children of the 2nd wives and children of the 3rd wives. So there was a lot of animosity between the 2 families. Unfortunately, Tan Kaki couldn't cope. And then he sort of moved himself to Yishun. Yishun gave him a couple of rooms upstairs, I think on the 3rd floor, and that's where he lived until the Japanese came. He had a very firm belief in not spoiling his children with money or an easy life. He once said, "I don't believe in giving money to my children. If they are smart, they will do well on their own, and they don't need my support. If they are foolish, no amount of my money is going to help them." So I believe in this way he actually shirked his duty as a father, quite correctly expected his friends and supporters to step forward to help his family when the need arose. And that happened quite a lot when he lost his fortune, and he expected Li Gongjian to come and help. And Li Gongjian's wife was actually very close to my grandmother, and she would come and visit very frequently, give her an allowance to allow her to live comfortably. But before that, there were times when it was quite tough managing a household. And there was this famous story of my grandmother. Actually, when she discovered there wasn't enough rice, not enough money to buy rice, she actually marched over to grandfather's rice warehouse and demanded bags of rice from the manager of the warehouse. And of course, she was able to get away with that. So again, that was maybe quite hilarious for us. Now, it's an interesting area here where people actually came to help. One day when my father, I think he and his mother lost their house. The house was taken away by the banks. This was when his fortune was going downhill. My father, aged 24, was worried about how he's going to house his mother and all his siblings. And he thought he could borrow from a rich relative, but this relative refused to give him more, give him some excuse. And there was a moment when he was at a loss as to what to do. He actually found this nice house. I'll show it to you in a minute. I'll come back to that. Okay. This is the house. in 6 Kingston Road that he eventually bought. Now, who should come along but a man called Mr. Diao Gong, who was a simple, illiterate boatman, very young, when he rowed my grandfather between Jimei and Xiamen every day. And TKK took a liking to him and say, look, you know, you're a fine young man, you're going to waste your life here, come with me to the Nanyang, seek your fortune there. This man actually came, and eventually he made good, still illiterate, but he had a very sharp mind. He eventually owned a whole fleet of bumboats, and he was always first off the post, you know, when the telegraph boys came down from the top of the hill to announce that there is a Ang Mo ship waiting out there, ready to load rubber, and he was the first to rush over to the rubber warehouse, pick up the rubber, and send it to the mothership outside. That's how he made his money. And this man couldn't understand English at all, and a lot of people made fun of him, but he became very wealthy, put his money into property and all this. So he was the one who came around to my father and said, here's the $14,000 you need to buy this house that you see, 33,000 square feet, whatever, in 3 Milestone Bukit Timah. Now it's very posh, this area, but in those days it's really right in the middle of the jungle. Right. The woman that you see next to this house was my grandmother, and she lived there for the next 60 years until her death. Well, no, maybe 40 years. She passed away in 1972 at the age of 94. And she had bound feet, and she came from a humble family. She was born here. Her father ran the Sarabat stall. I don't know if you know, a very humble tea stall in the road junction between Thompson Road and Upper Thompson Road. And my grandfather used to drive past to visit his estates in Upper Thompson, and he would stop by to drink tea. So obviously this man will, you know, rush forward and said, you know, here's my daughter, you know, would you like to marry her? Age 16. So there we are. She had the family bound her feet because they wanted her to live the life of a leisure lady. That was enormously painful. She wouldn't even tell us about it. But as a child, I used to be able to, you know, I used to play with her feet. They were like little lotus buds, you know. So that was her sacrifice. Very interesting. Right, this picture is very, very well known, interesting to me anyway, taken in 1939. These are all my cousins, from the oldest to the youngest. The little girl that is fifth from the right side is my cousin Un Leong, and she is here. She is the only person here. Out of all my relatives. 1939, you know why I knew about the date? The little baby was my sister, and she was born in June 1939, so this is probably later 1939. Before the war, when things were still quite hunky-dory, you know, and this was possibly taken in 6 Kingston Road itself. And these children came from 3 families from my grandmother's side. And it's historic because it's before the war. When war came, everybody abandoned all their photos except my mother. My mother abandoned her trousseau, all her wedding stuff, wedding garments, all her jewelry. She only took these photos with her. She felt they're more valuable than wedding trousseaus and jewelry. So that was, you know, amazing foresight on her part. Now, this handsome man on the right side is number 2 uncle, Kwat Siong, from the first wife. And he's also in this group picture. He's the only man there, and the rest were his women relatives, including his daughter and his wife, and my mother, who wasn't married yet, on the left side, she's a fashionable one with the socks. I find this photo interesting simply because the whole family is together and they were dressed very elegantly, well posed. This was a time when the families were wealthy, and this is how they get together. And the older ladies were probably from the island of Gulangi. Gulangi is well known for having people who would eventually migrate to various parts of the world, United States, Australia, Singapore, bringing their cultured habits with them. Now, these are the only two pictures I could find of my grandfather with members of our family. On the left was with Sako, the third wife, and my grandmother's eldest daughter. And the one on the right was with the number 7 uncle and his wife. This uncle was also the father of Tan Kun Po, Danny Tan. Some of you may know him. We call him Chichik. And these two pictures were taken in Jimei, I'm quite sure. After he finally left Singapore for Jimei. So they're probably in the early 50s. You could see Tan Kaki was quite old already. He would die in 1961 at the age of 86, so he's probably in his late 70s here. This wedding photo is my parents' wedding, and to the left of my father is Tan Guan Jie, which he's here again in the year 2004 on the left. And he and my father, which is on the right, were, obviously very close. So this was one of the times when they get together. They both wanted to live in Katong. After moving over from Bukit Timah, they lived in Bukit Timah for 40, 50 years, moved to Katong in their old age to be close to the Chinese swimming club. Because both of them actually go swimming there every day without fail, rain or shine. They would head for the Chinese swimming club. The young lady, the bridesmaid on the right, is actually my cousin from uncle number 2. Uncle number 2 is that handsome young man that you saw, is her father, Beijing. And she belongs to the Hong Kong side of the family. Now, this was my father's burial in Jimei. He asked for his ashes to be brought over. And this was the year 2006. He had died in October the 1st, 2006. So my Jimei friends, Jimei Xiao Yu said, oh, that's a date that is very easy to remember, October the 1st, National Day of China. And a few days later, I brought his ashes over. And Jimei Xiao Yu organized the simple ceremony. They even got me a government boat to take the ashes over to the coast, which faces the cenotaph, the Ao Yan, and the Jinian Bay, because that was my father's wish to drop the ashes out there. He was really attached to his father, more than all the other sons, and this was his last wish. So here you could see trying to throw the ashes into the water, and DJ, the Chen Jiagen, the Zhang Sun, DJ, he's the son, the only son from the eldest son, was there to help me. That was the first time to speak Mandarin, reading from text. So it was a bit of a struggle. But Jimei Xiao Yu people, including the principals of Jimei Dashue and all this, they were there to attend the ceremony. Now, this is the Guji. The 4 of us here, we are cousins, except for Charles on the right, he's our nephew. Charles Chan from the Chang Kang Sui line, descended line. To the right of me, which is on the left, was DJ, myself, and Jun Bao, Danny Tan. This was taken a few years ago, before Danny passed away. The four of us were known as the principal coordinators whenever we organized trips for Tan Kah Kie's descendants to go to China. We would be the ones in charge, and China would deal with us on emails and phone calls and so forth. And now, we make several trips like this, in fact, once every 3 years, once every 4 years, we, the descendants of Tan Kah Kie, because the third generation felt that the fourth and the fifth generation ought really to know more about what grandfather had done for education, for the country, for the eradication of poverty. So this was the year 2008, which coincided with the opening of the Chen Jiagen Guan. The Guan is enormous. It's the size of our national museum, even bigger. I wish all of you could have a chance to go. Everything you need to know about the life history of Tan Kah Kie, including his supporters, his brother, for instance, Chen Jingxian, Dan Laksai, Li Gongjian will all be there. I had to help them translate a lot of the text into English. At first, I didn't think that was important enough, but later, I'm glad I did it because there were a lot of Huaqiao Filipinos who visited the museum. They still do today, and they appreciated the English text. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to read Chinese. So this was 100 descendants. Now, it's quite a feat to organize a trip like this. It's almost like an odyssey. I think we spent like 10 days in 3 parts of China. First, we arrived in Xiamen, Jimei. We were banqueted, and we heard speeches, and we went to the sports stadium and so forth. We went to concerts as well. And then we would go to a place for a break. I can't remember, was this Hangzhou and Jiangsu, Nanjing at that time. We also went to Jiuzhaigou, what other places? Shandong, Taiyuan, all the very nice places. And then the last stop will be Beijing, and then we will have the Tongzhanbu and the Qiaolian entertain us in these magnificent buildings, again with very nice portraits. So this was China's appreciation shown to us for what Tan Kah Kie had done for the country. Here's another group, the much younger group. We deliberately asked for the 5th generation, so this was held immediately after the November exams in Singapore, so mostly the Singaporeans. And another one, Beijing Tiananmen. This could be the same one, 2008. We designed this logo with a bell. The bell is Tan Kah Kie's motto and he said he needed to wake up the population from their stupors, from their lull, from their sleep, wake up. It's high time you take matters in your own hands and eradicate all the feudalistic practices and get on board the new republic build up China again. So he would say that maybe in the 1920s, 1930s, and the bell was his logo. Chong, there's I guess 2 meanings to that. One is the bell, and the other is 中国. Now, some of my cousins also hold legacy tours in Singapore and Malaysia, and this is one legacy tour conducted 3 years ago. We visited Yi He Xuan, and we got a very nice reception here. So finally, this is my last photo. You'll be very interested in this one, 1923. And guess who is that very handsome young man in white, second from the right in front? None other than Tan Lak Sai. He must have been like 22 years old. He worked for Tan Kah Kee, and he looked like a very intelligent fellow, and very handsome too. This was Tan Kah Kee's office, workshop, I don't know. But there are 3 rubber tires there, so probably it's the front of his workshop, his rubber manufactory. And this is quite a rare photo as well. And Tan Kah Kee is the man right in the center with the black vest. So I've come to the end of my talk. Some of you may recognize this photo. It's taken just out here on the MRT of Tan Kah Kee MRT. And these are the escalators, a very long escalator leading down to the station. All these people here are my nephews, my cousins, and that's part of the heritage tour. I've come to the end. I don't think I've left out very much here, but there are always lots of stories. We meet again maybe in 5 years' time, and I can tell you more. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dan. It has been a long day, and thank you to all that have stayed throughout the forum. We have come to the end of our forum, and we hope you have enjoyed it. Thank you once again, and have a nice day. 各位嘉宾，今天下午2019年陈嘉庚论坛以完美画上句号。我们感谢您的参与，祝您有个愉快的周末，谢谢。